Hello, and welcome to the Judo Way of Life podcast. Today, I have the privilege of talking to Ewan Beaton. Ewan is currently the high performance coach in Alberta, Canada, and has previously been a high performance coach in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. In addition to this, Ewan was the Canadian Olympic team coach at both the 2004 and 2008 Olympic Games. As a competitive athlete, Ewan represented Canada at 3 World Championships and at both the 1992 and 1996 Olympic Games. He won the 1995 Pan American Championships and was a 5-time Canadian national champion. Hello Ewan, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's great to join you.
I suppose I'd like to just get started with maybe a bit of a background on yourself and how you got started in judo.
You know, in North America, judo is not, and especially in Canada, it's not something that's fully advertised and everywhere. But I was lucky enough that my gym teacher at my school was also a black belt in judo. So my brother started judo, and about 4 months into it, he kept on coming home and, throwing me, putting me into pins, and really encouraging me to start the sport. And after taking a little bit of a beating and getting tired of taking a beating, I joined the club and really, I haven't stopped doing judo yet since then. And that's almost coming up 45 years. So it's been quite a journey. But it all started out of, one person being a coach, and then I had the connection and I was able to join.
What was judo like in Canada back then as a sport?
It was very grassroots, and how I mean that is that, we had people that really doing judo, and especially if you're an instructor, just for the love of it. And when you're holding local tournaments and just on whatever mats you could have and whatever, it was really kind of throw some mats down and let's do judo. There was like no real organized clubs. There wasn't, especially in the city I'm from, which is Winnipeg. There wasn't any permanent clubs. There wasn't a real formal dojo. It was really, gym mats down in a school or gym mats in a community club and do your judo. So it was like really, really grassroots. With that being said, you don't need to have the fanciest judo club in the world to do judo. And that's something that's really important to know, is that a judo club isn't defined on, a physical structure. A judo club is really defined on the culture and the people that you're going to grow in that judo club.
When you started, how old were you again, did you say?
It was 8 years old. Yeah, just about 8 years old. So, like a lot of young kids, you're trying a bunch of different sports, and that's the one that really intrigued me.
What was it about judo then that kept you engaged?
It's kind of, especially at that age, I always liked the fight. My dad's a Scotsman. He was a professional boxer. And at the time, I always tell this story that we used to have boxing matches live on TV, not pay-per-view and stuff like this. And one of his favorite things was always in between the fights or the rounds, he would always have me and my brother box for a minute, and then we'd watch the 3 minutes or the 2 minutes round, and then we'd box. And so, that was kind of like the little bit of culture that I grew up in. It was like a tough, fight type of culture. So you know what? Just fighting came natural. It was just something that was in our blood, and it was something that we grew up with as a kids, and now it had a little bit more structure to it, and definitely, we always had fun.
Good. And as you grew up with the sport, where did it sort of take a turn from just being maybe a hobby or, just a sport you were doing as a kid and became something a bit more serious?
You know what? There's so many little areas of those moments, those turning moments. So I think there's a couple of turning moments. One was not even my success. It was my brother's success at the national level, and he was starting to win medals at the national championships. He was, a few years older than me. And he started like carving out a pathway of success. And then, naturally, you feel that you're going to follow that same pathway. And then really the turning point came actually when my first coach, the one that I started, that teacher who was teaching at my school, he shut his judo club. So when he shut his judo club, he recommended us to go to one club, and my brother went to more of a performance club. And, that was the decision time. The decision time was either, go to the performance club and really go forward with it, or, it's time to pack the bags. And to the credit of my brother and my father, who didn't want to drive to two different clubs, they pushed us towards the performance club. So, and that was it. As soon as I got into the performance club, and things were a little different, or a lot different than it is now, because now in Canada, when you jump into a senior program, usually you're dealing with U21s and U18s on the mat. In Canada, you're not getting too many of those, tough 20, 25-year-old, 30-year-olds on the mat. Well, when I was pushed into that club, and I was only 13 years old, 14 years old, I had to deal with the tough 20-year-old, 25-year-old, and 30-year-olds. And automatically, that made the biggest difference. And that's when I also saw a little bit more professionalism by older judoka. And that was one of the key turning points.
When you say a performance club, I know you just mentioned there in terms of the tougher, older players, but can you give us a bit of an idea what the training was like at that level?
Well, the performance club, so it was run by our provincial coach, and it was at the University of Manitoba. And lucky enough that Mark Berger, who was an Olympic bronze medalist, who won Olympic bronze medals in 1984, was part of that club. So, it was... There's obviously a difference between 1980s training than compared to what the training is now and the professionalism of the training. But it was good, hard training, randori training. But it was still classical Japanese style of practice. You warm up your newaza uchikomi, randori, uchikomi, randori. So it was still a Japanese style. It wasn't like European drilling or, specific drilling. And then a lot of conditioning, stairs after training, fitness, sprints. It was very 1980s style of training, which, again, old time, tough training. There's nothing wrong with it. But, that was like, again, being a young judoka, that was probably perfect for my age and my development.
And when you were coming through the ranks in that system, was there much of a pathway in terms of, developing as an Olympic athlete?
To be honest, there wasn't much of a pathway. And I had many discussions with either judokas that were close to my era or judokas that were before me. And one of the judokas from my area, he's a very good wrestler, national champion wrestler, and national champion in judo. And, he went the wrestling route. And for that exact reason, he said, I looked at both sports, and there was a clear pathway through university and to the Olympics. And again, he became an Olympian in wrestling. He became a coach of an Olympic gold medalist of Daniel Agali. He's one of the most celebrated wrestlers. His wrestling was all based on, Saonegis and Ouchigaris, but there was that pathway. So when I was coming up, there was no pathway other than we knew that the best athletes in Canada have to at some point transfer to Montreal. And in Montreal, Mr. Nakamura had been running basically the National Training Center and, collecting the best athletes and not necessarily drafting them and not necessarily looking for them, but the reputation was there. You knew that, that's where the best athletes ended up. And that was your pathway. It was an accidental pathway. When I ended up going to the national team, it was in 2007. We had a 3-week training camp in Montreal, and it was preparation for the World Championship Senior World Championship team and Pan American Games team. And after that 3 weeks, my mind was set that if I was going to give judo any type of a chance, I'm going to have to make it and transfer to where the level of partners challenge me in my decision making. And that is one of the key factors, because you can have great practices in every single center, no matter what. A coach can push you, they can make you tired and things like that. But in randori, you have to be challenged by decision making. And for me, that was the key factor, is that, I could stay where I was, get pushed, be in great shape and all those things, but I wasn't going to be challenged by partners that were going to make me make decisions that were either going to be positive, where I throw, or negative, where I get thrown, or so, and especially in Newaza, because when I showed up at the National Training Center, I possibly had the worst Newaza in the world, and that was reversed very quickly.
And so you started to train at the full-time center, and is that what sort of led you in towards like the World Championships and then the subsequent Olympic Championships?
Yeah, you know what? So we had a training center, but it was unofficially a national training center. There was, like I said, the pathway in Canada, especially back then, and especially compared to what we've been able to do in the last, 25 years of how to develop a pathway in Canada to take our talent. It was really a club that, had, all the best players. And, we just, you look at our group of athletes that were there, and you look at our Canadian coaching staff now, and we all had similar ambitions. And the ambition of Nicholas Gill as a leader has not changed a day from the day that I met him. He wanted to be one of the best in the world. I'm going to be one of the best in the world, and who's going to stop me? And that's the attitude he still has today. It's the attitude he had the day I met him. That's the attitude that he had when I did Randori with him. It's the attitude, and again, when you meet a kid at 15 years old, and that's their attitude, and you're like, wow, that's pretty astonishing. And those are you start to surround yourselves with those people. That's when you yourself start to really start thinking lofty goals, and you start thinking about winning, and then trying to break down those barriers on how can you win, rather than it just being a dream. So, again, the piece that at our National Training Center, the Shidokan Judo Club, that's where it was with Mr. Nakamura, who is a phenomenal technician. Like I said, it was our way of figuring things out. And when I say figuring things out is that, we are doing a lot of self-coaching and self-directing. We're using books to, find the best training plans. We really didn't have a system. We had a phenomenal club. We had a phenomenal organization, and then that's it. We really did a lot ourselves. With everything being said, in 1991, there was a big change in our federation, and that was hiring of foreign coaches, an Andre Sunday from Poland, a Lila Longuet from France, who started to lay a pathway of excellence. And that, looking back at that, again, we should have probably been a little bit more open to some of their suggestions. But that was really, again, one of those steps that, we use those individuals to bridge the gap where the club couldn't bridge the gap. And, again, that's credit to Judo Canada to pick some of the coaches that were perfect for us at the time. But like I said, it's funny when you talk about pathway, because there wasn't much of one that was direct. Great training, great coaches, but there wasn't a pathway to excellence. So that's kind of where I was.
Well, like you said at the beginning, it's not always about the training equipment; it's about the people that are training. And I suppose it'd be the same for a pathway. Not all pathways are good, or that they don't always work. And sometimes it's just the will of the individuals to push on.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to talk about your Olympic experience, because you went to the 92 and the 96 Olympics. Was competing at the Olympic Games always an aspiration of yours, or was that something that developed over your career?
You know what? I could remember in 1984, and I had just transferred to that performance club when I was in Winnipeg. And, I can remember the night in Los Angeles. I was in Winnipeg in the basement, and Mark Berger from my judo club popped up on our television, and he won a bronze medal. And the impact that had on me, that said, that's somebody I know. That's somebody I see every day. This is possible. So that was like one of the catalysts that kind of said, hey, I know that person. I've seen that person. That person's been in the dojo with me. Why can't I? Right. So that was my Olympic thought process. The two Olympic Games were very different for me. 92 going in, we were young, we were ambitious and very hungry. And the Olympics went really well for us. Nicholas Gill won the bronze medal right away. Our team was winning matches. We were winning multiple matches. We were getting into good. So by the time, 60 kilos was the last day, I was full of energy, ready to perform, no matter what. And the season, again, I was still young in my international career. So the event before the Olympics, we had an international event in Madrid. I won that event, which was nice. I went 5-0. So my last match is going into the Olympic Games. Even though it wasn't the highest level one, you're full of confidence. So I performed to a decent level. Finishing 2-2, and I would be lying to say that you don't think about some of those matches you lost. Like to this day, I think about the match against the Frenchman that I lost in the repressage. Today I think about it and I use that as my experience because that was a match to win, and I made some mistakes. But overall, going to the Olympics, like I say to people, I go, there's a few moments in my life that I will never forget, and one of the moments was walking through the little like alley to the door to now the right into the opening ceremonies. And you went from not seeing very much to 60,000 people in the stands, and that experience and that exhilaration, that opening ceremonies, right now I have goosebumps right now. Like those memories are just so rich that like, again, just amazing. So it was an amazing experience, and that's like I like to tell people. I say it's a lot of sacrifice to get there, and not everybody gets there. But in this life that we live, life is about kind of looking for those opportunities and living those journeys and trying to have that Olympic journey. Like it really is about that journey, and to actually get there, you have to appreciate it when you do get there. 96 was a whole different story, because after 92, the one thing that I did say to myself is that I really wanted to come into the 96 Olympics on a consistent role. So I wanted to be like, what? Back then we didn't have world rankings, right? So I wanted to win, some major tournaments or major events every year leading up to the Olympics. So like in 93, I won the Dutch Open, medaling in British Open, medaling in other little events, then winning the Continentals, the Pan Am Games, under huge amounts of stress for our Olympic qualification. And then before the winter tour, before the Olympics, taking some medals at European A events, so all those things were like, kind of like I said, I wanted to have that little bit of consistency, that I'd have that little bit of confidence going in there. So, 96 was like, again, going in the good direction. And then, the thing is I kind of put a finish of my career at 96. So that I had it in my head. And the Olympic qualification system was so difficult that after I qualified and won the fight-offs, I relaxed mentally. And when I relaxed mentally, I know now I flushed the Olympic Games down the toilet, but I relaxed and felt I had achievement. And really the achievement should have been, at the Olympics. So unlike 92, we went to do some training in Japan and we did all this stuff. And I was like, my judo was probably at the highest level and even higher than when I was medaling in Europe before the games in February and March. But we went to a tournament in Italy, a pre-tournament at Trattori, and going from Japan to Trattori to fight Europeans, I didn't have enough time to adapt. So I went, I think I went 1-1, and all my confidence was gone by then. So going into 96 Olympics, my mindset was like in such a different place, and it wasn't about performance. It was more about ending the journey. And you know what? That's the thing that I'm disappointed about when I think about 96 is that, I didn't give myself the chance to have my best performance. Was it an amazing Olympics? All Olympics are. If I compare the two Olympics, Barcelona being such a classic, a European city, beautiful. 96 Olympics, it's Atlanta, Georgia. You're on a university campus. It has a lot of USA sparkle to it, but it doesn't have that authentic Olympic feel to it. And yeah, so, I like I said, there's really, you sound selfish when you say you're disappointed about going to the Olympics, but, the goal is never to sit in the stands and watch other people's flags get raised. And that's never the goal. And it wasn't ever the goal for me. So, my Olympic experiences have been amazing, but I'll quote Nicholas Gill. He goes, yeah, Olympics are much better when you win a medal. It's quite simple, but yeah, I believe him.
Yeah. The closest I've got was London 2012, and I was volunteer helping out. And I remember being at the side of the mat and, just thinking what from both sides of the coin in terms of, you're seeing some people's dreams being made and some people's dreams being just broken in that moment.
Yeah.
Depending on which way the referee's arm goes at the end of the 4 minute or 5 minutes then, but yeah, at the end of the contest. And it was a very interesting insight to see the games, because it was always something I aspired to go to and never managed. But I didn't put it into the perspective, like you say, of the because in my head it was always, go to the Olympics, win a medal. It was never the context of what what it's like for the person who doesn't. And it was a bit of a sort of a maturing moment for me, I think, actually, there watching that and seeing that other side of it.
Well, for me, it's what I always say to people is no matter if you're Olympic champion or you're out in the first round, and especially in this modern Olympics, the 99% of them put in the same sacrifices, same effort, and same everything. And it's painful. It's painful to not reach your goals. And it's at the same time, you're in this place where you're supposed to be celebrating. And at the same time, it can also be one of the most painful things of your life. So it's the Olympics is like I try to explain this to people, and they're like, but you're one in the yes, you're right, but you're talking like, again, you're a sportsman yourself. There's a little bit of alpha dog in you, and that alpha dog, no matter what, is never satisfied.
Yeah, very much agree with that. Yeah, there's always a little bit of you, even and this might sound stupid, there's even times when I've won and I was like, I could have won a little bit better.
No, that doesn't sound stupid at all.
It's just, well, on paper it sounds stupid, but yeah, it makes sense, I think, to a lot of athletes.
Yeah. No, after the fact, again, when you use perspective and you're years away from it, you kind of like, that was a little silly of me, but in the moment, you think about every single detail, and hopefully you have somebody to say, be quiet, you did well, enjoy.
Yeah, well, something I think hindsight can be it can be good, but then obviously if you start going, could have done this, could have done that, and it can be I think a negative, or can be a very negative sort of path to go down. I think it's just reminding yourself, you did the best you could at the time.
Yep.
And you're only able to look back at it now critically, or actually analyze what you're doing because new information that's come to light. And I think it can be quite constructive. I've spoken to other coaches in terms of analysing our competitive career so that we can hopefully better coach the players that are coming through and hopefully get them to reach higher levels than we ever reached ourselves as athletes. So I think it can be quite constructive in that manner.
Absolutely.
So you were saying at 96, that was it. You said that was going to be the point where you were going to, I think you said, stop as a competitive career. Is that correct?
Yes, that is.
And then you transition into coaching?
Yes.
How was that transition from athlete to coach?
You know what? It was great. There's a few hiccups here and there, but it's what I say to people is that you put a huge amount of time into getting this PhD of judo, and now you're able to actually use that education in a different way, and to try to now help other people try to reach their goals, and if not reach their goals, become better people, to give them confidence. And again, there's all these other attributes of judo that when you're an athlete, you don't think about those attributes. But when you're a coach, you actually start to see them the more you get to instill those hard work values. And again, giving them confidence and watching them grow. And, so again, for me, being a coach is and transferring, and especially after an Olympic Games and stuff like that, it was really kind of a beautiful moment in my life. It was a little difficult moment in my life because in my personal life, it was kind of going into the toilet at the same time. But then I had this beautiful moment of being able to transfer to be a coach and do something I love. For you talk to most people, it's like the fact that you get to do a job that you love and you have passion for, and you're usually one of the luckiest people in the world.
So with the coaching, did you, from my notes, you went into as a high performance coach in Saskatchewan?
Yes, that was my first position. And we again, a very small judo community. And so when I say small judo community, we're looking at, under 1,000 members for, a population of about, at that time, about 800,000 people.
And how do you coach at grassroots level, maybe as an athlete as you were coming through, or did you just go straight from, say, the 96 Olympics and move straight into high performance coaching?
You know what? I was lucky. The coach before me, Kim Berge, she was a national team member, and she did a really good job with a small group of performance athletes. And they were in the perfect situation for me to come in and take them to the next level. And so I was lucky. I was gifted with about 10 athletes that were ready, again, 50, anywhere between 14 and 16 years old. And they were ready to take in the information. The rest of it it's grassroots, but it's really, we focused on, Saskatchewan is in the farmland. It's really the farmland. And if you know one thing about farmers is they're the hardest working people in the world, just incredible. And they're the most giving people in the world. So to build a culture and then teach judo within that culture was the key factor. And again, when you get to work with that quality of people, again, the job was simple in that sense.
And then you worked as a high performance coach in a number of different provinces.
Yes.
Was there much of a difference in terms of maybe attitude or styles of judo between the different areas?
There's not so much, again, I did a lot of my provincial coaching is in Western Canada. So, Alberta, where I am now, it's a little bit more cowboy and redneck. And like I say we're Canada's Texas, right? They don't take crap from no one. And, Saskatchewan is humble and hardworking and determination. And then in Winnipeg, in Manitoba, where I'm from, it's a little bit of a mixture of that and a little bit more of uncertainty that was there. And then when I worked with the national team in Montreal, and so I was a national coach in Montreal, and our team director, whatever you want to describe it, again, that was more totally, again, right back into the driving seat of performance, and then, trying to get the talent from the provinces to come up into our performance program. So again, the judo is very similar in Canada. There wasn't like, this province does this style and that one does that style. Now there is a little bit of a difference because we have so many, again, in BC, we have Jeremy Labrie, who was a national team member from France. I'm here in Alberta. Michael Horley is in Saskatchewan. We have Artin Nakamura, who's a Brazilian, who's in Manitoba. We have James Miller in Ontario. And then we have Sergio Pasola, a Brazilian, who's in Quebec. So now you can see that there's like a different attitude and a different feel and a different flavor from each province. But when I was coaching, we were like one flavor. We were vanilla all the way across.
And then you mentioned there about you were the team leader for the Olympic Games team, and was it 2004 and 2008? You were coaching the Olympic team.
So 2001, again in 1999, I took the junior national coaching position, and I was still in the provinces then. And then I transferred up to the national team, and I took what we called the coach coordinator. So in that position, basically really was if we're going to redefine it, it was the high performance director position and coach. So back then, Judo Canada didn't have it very much capacity. So there was 2 or 3 people in the office. I was doing the job of high performance director plus on the mats coaching and going forward. We had a couple different training centers, and we had a couple different coaches. So we were driving through everything, going through everything. My job was, both the Olympic team, and I would regularly travel with our Olympic team as the manager. So I was in Manchester for the Commonwealth Games, which is one of my beautiful memories, was Commonwealth Games, especially the atmosphere in that arena was just fabulous. And managers at World Championships and so on, and coaching all the athletes. I wasn't coaching the chair, but I was coaching them at the practices and things like that. So me making onto the 2004 team as a coach is kind of a terrible story because one of the coaches at the time was removed because of bad conduct. He was removed from the team, and I was voted by the team members to take his position, and which was great. And again, it's athletes that I was coaching the whole time. I just wasn't able to sit in the chair, and sitting in the chair is one part of it, but really what's being done on the mats and creating that culture is really the key, right? Again, it's the apples that make apple pie. So I was put into the coaching position in 2004. We had a strong performance. I was lucky enough to be in the chair for Mary Helene Chisholm, who unfortunately lost for a bronze medal in the bronze medal match to Zollner from Slovenia, who would become an Olympic champion later on. And Zollner came into the Olympics as a wild card, which is, like I said, I was interviewed by Slovenian TV. I said, well, you'll never get a better wild card than that, into the Olympic Games. But that 2004 was an amazing experience. As a coach, one of my best friends, Nicholas Gill, got to carry the flag for Canada. So there was so many little highlights that were fantastic. But again, Olympics are always better when somebody gets on the podium. so again, there was a lot of great things, but that was the 2004. 2008, I was basically strictly there in more of a manager position. The great thing about the 2008 Olympics is we had one of the athletes who, when I first became a coach in Saskatchewan, made the Olympic team. So one of the athletes that, I, from 15 years old, was basically followed the journey the whole time. And then when he came to the National Training Center, we continued my coaching with him. And so he finished, he finished 7th at the Olympic Games, so Fraser Will from Star City, Saskatchewan, population 25 people. So just think about that. Star City, population 25 people, northern Saskatchewan. And, like I always say to him, I say, one of the reasons that you struggled in those key moments is that, you're too much of a small city boy where you didn't have that, pump your chest and I can win this thing. It was more, oh, golly shucks, this is just fantastic, right? So, but again, an amazing athlete, an amazing player, 7th at the Olympics. It was a great journey. So yeah, those Olympics as a coach and a manager, in Beijing was just amazing. And again, the atmosphere of Athens, the atmosphere of Beijing, you really had that feel of an Olympic Games, that feel of it brought me back memories of Barcelona, that really special moments that were happened by, obviously all the athletes and the coaches. So yeah, that was my kind of coaching at the Olympics. It was, it is a little bit more stressful and a little bit more pressure when you're being paid to produce performance. And, you have to make your performance plans and pathways and all those things that we were talking about earlier. When I came onto the national team, I vowed to myself that we were going to lay a foundation that's going to create a pathway that's going to allow us to perform and to go forward in a way that we can have repeatable performance, not just when I'm there, but following. And to this day, if we look at the Canadian national team program and we look at our national team handbook, I'm proud to say, hey, there, great, that program still went through and that one went through and that one was tweaked and that one was evolved. But a lot of the foundation was laid by myself and Nicholas Gill when he just retired. And, we laid this foundation that said, we're not just going to do this randomly. It's not going to be by accident. We need to find a way to really guide our system, get our talent into there. And that was, my experience. And that was my contribution to the Canadian program, and again, I'm still involved in the Canadian program, just not to the extent, that I was at that time.
So you've got a very well-rounded experience in terms of being an athlete and then also coaching at the Olympics. I'm assuming it probably has happened, but if you get asked by one of your younger players or one of your young players says that, I want to go to the Olympics, what is your advice to them?
You know what? There's, the first thing my old coach, Mr. Nakamura, always says is, first, you have to love it. You have to love judo. And, that's what's going to get you out of the bed. You yourself was an athlete, and, judo is kind of like a love affair, right? So at some points there's, such high passion and such burning desire and everything this. And then there's times when, you're absolutely crushed and broken, and then you go back to that desire. Right. So, but, and at some point, you fall out of love and you move on. And what I tell people is that you need to keep that passion. That's one of the most important things. And it has to be passion for judo. And then you have to like training. You have to enjoy it. You need to know that it's not going to be easy. And there is going to be times that you're going to want to stop. And I don't care who you are, but at some point, you're going to have that moment that you're going to say, do I go forward or do I pack it in? And what I like to say to people is give yourself a realistic goal, and, don't say that, okay, I want to be Olympic champion at 22. Be realistic. I want to be Olympic champion at 27. I want to be the best I can be at an age where, it's realistic for me to say those words, because, if not, you're setting yourself up for failure. So those are some of the things that I like to talk about. One, we want to avoid ugly things of how much it's going to cost and stuff like that. We want to talk about like those things that are important, and again, there's the technical side, but, I think that burning desire is really what's going to help you.
And as a coach, I want to ask you, because obviously there's the technical element of teaching judo and learning judo. From what I know about the Canadian landscape, do you ever utilize any like the outdoor training? Do you do anything maybe that would be considered different training wise compared to maybe other countries?
You know what? I would love to say that we do, but, in my program, we're pretty good in meat and potatoes. So there is some training opportunities, but just like in the Games of Thrones, when they're like, winter is coming, and when winter is coming, and it gets too cold to like go and do things, it really does. So we really kind of stick with what we can do indoors, and so that's kind of the disappointment with it. But when we do get those opportunities in the spring to go train in the mountains and to go and do things like this. And it comes down to that burning desire. Like I tell kids, I go, you know what? As an athlete, I'll go back to being an athlete. And this I tell them all the time. Hey, it's Christmas morning. It's minus 35 outside. You want to enjoy your Christmas dinner. There's no treadmills around. You better put on as much clothes as you can and go running. And like, again, you come back looking like a popsicle because you have so much ice on top of you from the run and the perspiration. But you know what? That's the one thing about the Canadian, especially if you're out from the prairies, is you're naturally tough because winter makes you tough. End of story. Winter makes you tough unless you have a snowblower. But if you have to shovel and you have to go out there, and you can ask Michael Horley about pushing a car out of a ditch, or how cold it can get into Canada. You throw a glass of water into the air and it turns to snowflakes. It's just, there's some things that there's training, and then there's just living in a cold, tough environment like this that, kind of makes you a little bit bulletproof compared to some other people.
It's funny you mentioned that, because just going back to, you said Michael Hawley, we talk quite often, and we have like a very sort of opposite experience of the sort of November, December months. So you're saying there it's at minus 35 degrees, where in Sydney, Australia, it can be sort of plus 35, 40, if not even higher than 40 degrees. And, that makes it quite a hostile training environment as well, especially for myself as a pale ginger Englishman. Being out in the sun is not for too long in those temperatures is quite problematic. I think, so I thought about this because you mentioned there about the cold making, people tougher and, a bit more stronger and resilient. And I just don't feel as though the high heats really achieve the same grit, if that makes sense, in terms of, the mental conditioning and on. I think for me anyway, the high temperatures just made me a bit really lethargic, and they don't seem to, get the same, dig in and get on with it kind of mentality. I just want to go lie down in a cold shower. Well,
I think there's the two different environments of, when what comes with cold is the snow, right? The heat on the end of it is very painful, but when it snows, someone has to shovel it. It doesn't matter. You can't get away from it, right? There's like obstacles that, like you have to go and do this or you do not move. Where then in the cold, you can put on more clothes and you have to go do the job. In the heat is you keep on taking clothes off until you're like, oh, okay, I can't take this off. I'm going to go into the air conditioning or whatever else. But there's definitely a different environment. You can train through the cold. I don't think you can train through the heat. Like you can't. When it gets too hot, you can't train through it. It's like, yeah, I've taken everything off and stuff like this. I'm going to overheat, dehydrate, and everything else. So that it limits that. It gets actually dangerous to like train too hard in that heat compared to the cold. Like again, you put on more stuff, keep going, keep doing it, compared to like the heat where I think really, yes, obviously training in the cold can be dangerous, but I think, I would rather train somewhere where I can put stuff on and keep warm compared to, like, I think one of those tennis players at the Olympics said, I wasn't going to put my life on the line to keep going, because it was so hot and humid. So it is that little difference between those temperatures, especially when it comes to sports.
Yeah, it's something I've noticed that we still do the judo in the summer, and everyone struggles. But then as soon as it comes around, I'm going to obviously use this. We say the winter months here. It's definitely not winter. The winter months here is like a very nice, mild summer in the UK. But in comparison, everyone starts complaining about the cold, and it gets a bit wet and a bit rainy and stuff. And I definitely noticed the improvement in my conditioning having trained through the heat.
Absolutely.
When it comes around to what I would consider the more pleasant months of the year in Australia, you do some of you see the psychology change in people. Like they don't like the cold, and the people that do and sort of, like you say, embrace that and just get on with it. There's definitely a difference in the mental resilience of the individual.
Well, you know what? When we talk about hot and cold, is the amazing thing is the body adapts quickly, and so we had a really hot summer. And now we're kind of transitioning into the fall, and it's plus 20 now, and you're watching people like put on jackets and stuff like this. But you put that plus 20 in April, and there's people walking around with no shirts and everything like this, right? The body adapts, so quickly, and not only does the body adapt, the mental aspect of it, starts to adapt as well. So. Weather is really kind of interesting that way. And I know, thank goodness that we're a sport where we don't have to deal with those mental adjustments, that we're kind of that sport that has a controlled environment, because that uncontrolled environment, that's a whole other play on your mentality, and especially when we talk about performance or in a game situation.
Yeah, that was fantastic, Ewan. We'll wrap it up there.
Perfect.
Really enjoyed that conversation. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to come on and share your experiences and your thoughts on the sport.
No problem. It was a pleasure.